Welcome to Darkly Lit, where we meander through a dazzling fair, enchanted by the sights and inventions. But we also search for a dangerous man who goes by many monikers and has built his own castle used for nefarious purposes. I'm your host, Kayla King, and happy Halloween, everyone. I'm joined by my other two amazing co-hosts. We have Sade.
Hey, have you guys seen this shredded wheat stuff? No way this shit's gonna last.
And our other co-host, David King.
Yeah, shredded wheat, more like shredded doormat. I think we had the same idea.
My bad. Normally
No,
I
it's
just
great.
say
I'm glad
hi,
we could
but I
kinda
was
follow
like,
it.
I should talk shit on shredded wheat because I don't like it.
We should talk shit on shredded.
I'm not a big fan of shredded wheat, so, but it is popular, so. If you guys heard the first part and you're like, you know what, I know what they're going to be reading, and then heard about the shredded wheat and we're like, what the fuck are they talking about? Well, so we just read Devil in the White City by Erik Larson, which, David, want to give the description?
So Devil in the White City is a non-fiction book, the first one we've ever covered on Darkly Lit. And to go over, summarize the plot in huge detail feels kind of weird for non-fiction because there's a very huge amount of fact-based stuff worked into this narrative. But I'll just say the book chiefly concerns two narratives. One is about mainly Daniel Burnham and the people he puts together and the hopes and dreams of Chicago as the Columbian Exposition, aka the Chicago World's Fair, is constructed, and the trials and tribulations of setting up the fair, running the fair, and eventually closing the fair. In tandem with that, we also have the story of H.H. Holmes, widely considered one of America's first serial killers, and following his story from his beginnings to where he crosses paths with Chicago, mainly being when he moves into Englewood and builds his murder castle and all the nefarious things he does. These two plots, start in different points, intermingle, and then kind of go on their separate ways, but we still follow them both to the inevitable conclusions. In Holmes' case, how him trying to murder one of his old partners ends up kind of leading to his own downfall.
Yeah.
Oh, and also it's bookended by the sinking of the Titanic.
Yep.
To start off, what did you guys think of this book?
I don't ever read any, historical stuff. I love history, but I've always just preferred fiction when it comes to reading, so it was definitely different for me. I enjoyed listening to it because I like history podcasts. I'll do a lot of those, but I have to be in a very specific mood for those kind of podcasts. So I had a hard time sitting myself down to listen to it, or because it's I have to be deep into a project where I'm working with my hands, and that's when I'm in a history podcast mode. And this listening to it felt like a history podcast. And so, I just had a hard time getting to it, but I did like it. I could see myself listening to more stuff like this.
I was kind of the one who pushed for this book because I'd already read it once a while ago, and reading it again definitely helped reinforce it as one of the better nonfiction books I've read. And I think it's a real testament to Erik Larson's writing that I stayed as invested in this as I did. He has a way of making the facts come out in a much more digestible way, where you can follow this narrative and have these maybe more sensationalized accounts of certain characters, but it never feels sensationalized. It feels kind of grounded, for me at least. That was my takeaway from it. And I really enjoyed this particular book on both occasions of reading it. So it was great to revisit it again, and maybe a few years later at this point where I have a slightly different perspective and slightly different understanding of the material when I read it years ago. And I think it still holds up pretty well. I'm quite fond of this one.
Yeah, like you, I actually did read the novel earlier, about a few years ago, but it had been so long that there's a lot of details I forgot. David remembered a lot more than I did when we started discussing it. He's like, yeah, do you remember this? I'm like, what? That happened? So I'm glad I reread it. I try to read nonfiction novels to help challenge me, but it's not my favorite. I do prefer fiction. During challenges where book challenges that I take on, and they asked for, read a nonfiction novel, I always dread that, and I'm just like, but this is a very accessible book to read. First of all, it is very factual, but it is told in a way that is enjoyable, and the characters actually feel real. They're not like, I don't feel distance from them like sometimes when you hear about history, you know what I mean?
It's not just like facts being thrown at you or like a summary of events. There is like narrative to the presentation of all this information. So that definitely is what makes it very digestible.
Oh yeah. It's weird when you realize that you're reading about real people, which is I think one of the more unusual parts, because you get sort of these accounts of them and hypotheticals about maybe what they were thinking. I think in particular of the part where it's supposed to be showing Anna Williams' last moments before, like, as Holmes has her locked in his vault. Yeah. In that particular part, you know he doesn't really know what she's thinking, but it's a good bit of dramatic stuff that goes in there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more horrifying moments that happens in this. Yes, I know we're a horror podcast, but I will say the H.H. Holmes part of it, I want to say is more like a third of this novel, where most of it focuses on the Chicago World's Fair.
Yeah.
It felt like it was pretty evenly split for the first part of it, but then as you get like later in the book, it would go like, it would switch between perspectives between chapters, but then like for a good chunk of the middle, the latter part of the book, it's just consistently like fair-based, and then it goes back to Holmes for a bit, and then more about the fair. So yeah, it does. I think you're right. Once you hit a certain stride in the book, it stops being as evenly skewed between the two perspectives.
And then the last 50 pages is only dedicated to Holmes, because it's like the World's Fair ends, but then it's like, that's the point when Holmes is like, well, peace! I'm getting out of here, and I'm gonna kill my partner. And
I didn't kill him well enough, though, because now the authorities are gonna find me.
And then the focus goes on to Detective Geyer, who's like, I'm gonna find this. He's the guy who basically gets Holmes.
He's one of those Pinkerton detectives that's like, you know, they kind of try to immortalize, you know.
Great descriptions, like a walrus mustache. I'm like, okay, I can see this guy.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel with a lot of these characters. I'm like, yeah, I could see these people. I mean, before I read this novel, I didn't know almost anything about the Chicago World's Fair. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of moments where you're like, wait, they invented that? That happened? Mm-hmm. Wait, that's where it came from?
Mm-hmm. Shredded wheat, baby.
Well, not just shredded wheat. I mean, the Ferris wheel is the most famous one, I would say.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And electricity.
Well, the consistent, I mean, it's not like we didn't have electricity before, but the fact that this was the first opportunity for, like, the common person to see electric lights used in such a large capacity. I mean, the whole thing was lit with electric lights. And the fact that the way they chose the current they could be offered, they chose the one that was cheaper. It kind of, according to the book, and this is true, it did alter like the course of what kind of power we ended up using for the rest of American history, pretty much. And that's fascinating to me, just how much this fair like actually changed like society in so many ways, or at least that's the implication. There's a chapter I really like in there where they actually talk about all the people who were there and all the people who kind of met each other. The part that sticks out to me is the guy who invented the Braille typewriter, meeting Helen Keller.
Oh yeah, that was sweet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I also really love the moment immediately after that where Susan B. Anthony meets Buffalo Bill.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
Like, the two of them have this, like, respect for each other, because, like, she said, there's a whole thing in there about, oh, don't go to the fair on Sundays. There's a whole movement in that. And then Susan B. Anthony's like, I'll do what I want. And this clergy who's harassing her is like, well, would you go to see Buffalo Bill on Sunday? Because he had the concession right next door, and she's like, yes, in fact, I'd probably learn more there. And then Buffalo Bill hears about it. He's like, come to my show. I'm going to give you the best box in the house. And he straight up rides right up to her and, like, bows to her, and she, like, does the same to him. And it's like, I love that moment so much.
There are definitely, like, a lot of, like, really interesting details when it came to, like, just describing those, like, new innovations and how people might have experienced it. Just of, like, the part that stuck out to me was like, hey, look at that thing. Let's all climb on it. When they first started testing what's turning, I was like, oh my god, no. And then just the way people reacted to writing it, like the one guy who like tried to get out and the woman throwing her skirt over to calm him. That was great. There was one that stuck out to me where like a woman had described how just the experience of like everything suddenly becoming illuminated when the sun went down, and just like how novel of an experience that was back then.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting of just like there was a phrasing in there somewhere of like how like fascinating it was to just see so many lights in one place. And I was thinking about like how that's something that still like is captivating to us, because if you think of like our zoo here in Oregon, the Oregon Zoo will do this like Christmas lights thing where they put a whole bunch of lights in the zoo. I've never actually been to see it, but like, you know, people will go to see just a whole bunch of Christmas lights. Things like that I was like, okay, that would have been really cool to experience, and like just the novelty of it. And then also like how it's still kind of like, we haven't changed that much.
No.
No. You know, I think I may have mentioned this before to you guys, but I would love to be a time traveling tourist.
Oh man, that would be so cool.
and go to like different events. And I know that the World's Fair would be absolutely one of those events I would love to be able to like time travel to and then like spend a day there. I know that I have to think of it from an 1893 perspective, because I know we've seen inventions beyond belief now in 2022. I forgot what year it was for a second. Oh my gosh. Hold on.
Well, if next year is 2023, we are going to be...
That's the... Because the...
200 and...
Hold on. 1893 minus...
No, wait, not 200. What am I saying?
130 years since the World's Fair next year.
Wow.
Oh, God. Wow.
And shredded wheat is still going.
Yep, shredded wheat's still going.
As long as it's frosted.
Cracker Jacks aren't as popular. I know about them.
I love Cracker Jack.
I don't see them like being sold. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely not as popular. That's like an obscure, like maybe you'll find it in a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know for a fact the first time I've heard of Cracker Jacks was the baseball song.
Oh yeah.
Also, to realize that the do 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 do.
Yeah, just a lot of like really great, interesting details that just kind of like added to just like the expansive detail. Like it wasn't just like, oh, here's some cool facts about the World's Fair, but like all these other little interconnected things that just made it feel like, okay, yeah, this was a real thing.
What I think is also so fascinating is that, and Larson himself notes this at the very end of the book, how looking at this whole project being a matter of civic pride, like that's the whole reason they wanted to put on this show and put it together, because pride was at stake, is like, according to Larson, it was something that's like feels unheard of these days when it comes to like business ventures or ventures like this. Like it's not, you don't get that as strong as it used to. And I can kind of understand that sentiment, because the whole reason they put this in there is like, we have to show the world that we're awesome. Like America's got to compensate for something, because they're having a dick measuring contest literally with the Eiffel Tower.
It really is.
And our man George Ferris comes in here with his wheel, and it's way cooler. So I mean, the Eiffel Tower is still standing today, and that original Ferris wheel is long gone. But,
oh yeah.
I mean, the fact that it's as prolific as it is, the freaking Ferris wheel. Like, it's hard to think of. I mean, for us, it's definitely hard to think of a time when the Ferris wheel didn't exist as a carnival concession or even an amusement, any kind of amusement park ride like that.
The thing is, though, the Eiffel Tower is something that I see as more a monument.
Yes.
Where the Ferris wheel is more like an invention.
It's an attraction.
Yeah.
Like, so is the Eiffel Tower, but like it's it's a monument,
Yes.
Whereas a Ferris wheel, maybe just because we're used to seeing it in a carnival that like come and go, it's a fleeting attraction.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of Paris, or when most people think of Paris, they think of the Eiffel Tower. Like that goes hand in hand.
Well, it's like how when people think of New York, they think of the Empire State Building.
Well, I also think of the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, that too.
That's actually my first thought, is actually the Statue of Liberty.
I'm thinking of like tall buildings, but yeah.
But yeah, where a Ferris wheel, yeah, it's a fleeting attraction. It's not really, you don't associate it with like America.
No, I mean that is true.
Chicago.
But it says something about the staying power of it, that it is everywhere. I mean, it's not as strongly associated with Chicago or one location as like the Eiffel Tower is with Paris. So I get that. But for the time at the fair, they were like, we fucking did it. We out Eiffeled Eiffel. We did it. Take that, France.
The petty drama. I've never seen so many architects just get so bitchy towards each other.
Actually, I have a question for all of everybody present, and that's who's your favorite favorite uppity World's Fair architect person in this whole committee? And for me, it's Olmsted.
I was gonna say
I was gonna say that too.
I think we're all in accord about Olmsted. He's so obsessed with, like, the landscape needs to be like this. Landscape is art. Why doesn't anybody recognize me? Why can't I get rid of my tinnitus? My teeth hurt.
Poor guy.
I'm a victim of the Victorian diet, like everybody else. And, no matter how much that guy's health failed, he kept bouncing back, which is crazy.
Yeah, there's moments where I'm like, oh no, this guy's gonna die. And
The fact, okay, I know this is history, but the fact that John Root died before Olmsted is still kind of amazing to me.
I didn't find Daniel Burnham as interesting. Out of all the characters, like, I know he's the one we kind of follow.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he played his role, and, he had to be that, like, pillar for the World's Fair. Yeah, no. I don't know. I mean, everyone were real people.
Yeah.
So
that's why I think it's weird. That's why I think it's weird.
That.
That's why I think it's funny to say, so who's your favorite World's Fair character?
Yeah.
Choose your architect.
I did appreciate the cameo from Elias Disney.
Yes.
That's a good one.
That surprised me. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I did also, like, there was a comment at the end of, like, how maybe Disneyland could have been kind of, like, inherited something of the World's Fair, and that stuck out to me because as they were talking about, like, okay, they're gonna open and not everything is, like, finished. I was like, hey, happened to Disneyland too. So that made it very relatable, obviously, because we're all here at least a little too interested in the Disney parks history.
It's true.
Actually, I remember zeroing in when I first read it. Like, his son Walt would take note. I'm like, you bet your ass he did.
Yeah, I think I was listening while I was, like, making toast or something, and I just, like, froze, and I was like, wait, what? What?
There's that quote by the woman about when the lights come out at night. Walt Disney said something similar about, he's like, I love walking at Disneyland at night and the lights come out. When I read that, I'm like, yep, Walt probably took inspiration from that.
Yeah.
What's that? What was the quote of that chapter? Night is the magician?
I think so.
Yeah, like, being at Disneyland at night is magical, and I feel like that's the closest we're gonna get to the World's Fair.
Yeah, to at least that, like, that excitement of just being in this, like, atmosphere of, like, all these things happening around you and these attractions and the different things that you can see.
And there's lots of food concessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, there was so much food in this.
I love when they just had the menus and they're just the most, like, French extravagant things. And they're like, oh, and also during this course, there are cigarettes and cigars and wine. But you only have your cigarettes and cigars at this course.
I mean, one of the main reasons we decided to read this, especially for this podcast, is for the true crime aspect, which is about H.H. Holmes. That's what we qualified it for. And I do want to bring this up because recently a series came out about Jeffrey Dahmer that's had a lot of controversy.
Oh, yeah.
When is true crime acceptable versus being exploitive? I think it's okay with H.H. Holmes and stuff like that because that was 130 years ago. Mm-hmm. And enough time has passed that the victims, their
families, have likely passed, or their descendants are just, like, disconnected enough that, it's maybe, it's not so offensive. Whereas some of Dahmer's, the families of the victims, they're still around and they're likely still grieving. I think for me, because, like, I went through that serial killer phase in high school where I was, like, really interested and fascinated. It never got to the point where I was like, man, Richard Ramirez is a hot guy. That never got to that point. And, like, there's some interesting psychology that I was, like, learning about the other day and, like, why people get to that point. Or possible reason. But, like, that aside, I think when it comes to, like, where you're, like, glorifying the killer and making what they do seem, like, appealing, so you've gone too far.
Yeah.
When it is true crime, because I don't apply that to, like, fictional villains. Because that's that's an exploration of just, like, the human character. But when you are and you can glorify a villain in that sense, I think that's fine. But like,
we're talking about real people.
yeah,
here.
when it's real people who did real terrible things to actual people, then that's not okay. That's no bueno.
Yeah.
And what's important here, too, is even in this case, Holmes is not being glorified. Nothing he's done is being shown in any kind of... I think what appeals about this is more like, how did this guy get away with this for so long, and how did he do it? How did he manage to make it work? And what's so fascinating here, and I think what also fascinates people about, in general about true crime, especially when it comes to serial killers, is sort of the commonality of like the character of some of them. You read about Holmes and I immediately think of other, and you brought up Dahmer, and everybody say about them, oh, they were charming and polite and whatever on the surface.
Dahmer,
or Dahmer was or soft-spoken or whatever. Like Dahmer, I guess Dahmer was a weird case, but like I'm thinking of other people who came off as really charismatic and...
Oh, Ted Bundy is the prime
Ted
example
Bundy.
that everyone goes to.
Ted's a better example, but like Holmes is so goddamn charming apparently that he's able to like scam people constantly. He's always avoiding creditors. He's firing and hiring workers at different intervals, so no one sees how exactly the castle is built. He's a snake oil salesman for mail order nonsense, and he makes money hand over fist, and he just manages to fool everybody. And I think that's what's so fascinating about it for me, is just how long he was able to get away with this by pure dint of him being like charismatic, essentially.
See, and then one of the things that happens in the novel, I can't remember, like a child was so happy to be around him, or an animal, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But like there's always that theory where it's like, oh, dogs and children know when someone is bad. No. This guy basically, that's not true. I call that, honestly, if a dog's barking at you and is being, it's not because you're an asshole. It could be a multitude of different things. Or if a child is crying around you, it's not because they know, oh, there's something wrong with you. No. As we can see in this book, a murderer can be as charming to babies and pets as they can.
Well, I mean, look how long he was able to pull the wool over the eyes of, like, even his own wife and children.
The multiple wives.
Yeah, I think for me that was, like, the most fascinating, was just kind of like the way he was perceived by all the people who were, like, especially close to him, in quotations, because they didn't really know him. Obviously, that was a lot of stuff that was inferred from, like, maybe letters that they've written. Like that scene where Anna is, locked up in that chamber, and she's like, oh, it's an accident. Oh, he must have left the room, and that's why he can't hear me. Just like, I don't know, that for me was the most fascinating of, like, how he strung them along and, like, how he made them believe things.
So, and then there's Emmeline, who, there's a point where before she's gone missing, she's like, I can't be around him. No, there's something wrong with him. And she got close enough that she saw the bad in him. And then there's only a few handful of times that we actually see the murders, and they hit hard. Well, I think it's actually... Is it just the vault that we actively see a murder happen?
I think there were two.
Yeah, he kills... oh my gosh. What was her name?
With the chloroform, right?
The Christmas Eve murder that he performs.
Oh, that's right.
Where he kills... she was really tall. I'm suddenly blanking on her name, which is terrible, because he murders her because he's under the pretext that he's going to give her an abortion.
Yeah.
And he also kills her daughter, too. Mm-hmm. But we never see that. We only see him kill her with the chloroform.
Like with Emily, it's like she warns, says, oh no, there's something wrong with him, and then later on Holmes just lies and says, oh, she's gotten married, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
When? What? Yeah, here's a letter. And he forges it. The writing doesn't say directly he forged it or anything like that. The writing trusts us as readers to basically understand that he murdered her. This is how he covered his tracks.
Oh yeah, we know. We're savvy in that essence. And then the author trust us with that. And actually what's fascinating is, too, I don't know if this was necessarily intentional, but I kept in the back of my head that he still has a wife in Chicago and that it's Murda and his 2 daughters. And guess what? They become an afterthought to us just as much as they're an afterthought to Holmes.
Yeah. And he was still married to her. And
yeah, during that whole span that he was murdering women and a couple of men in the murder castle. And he's still somehow convincing them, somehow managing to maintain this sham of a marriage off to the side. And no one suspects him of anything. Like, even when he's, like, proposing to Minnie and bringing Anna along and, setting up to get that estate in Texas. It's fascinating.
I do appreciate that the focus is more on the victims and their relationship with Holmes rather than... I think there's only a couple chapters dedicated to him trying to set up the castle, but we never get, like, a full description of how he... Like, only... the vaults, and then later on when they start the police start exploring the castle that we see. We
understand. I think the one thing that's interesting, it focuses on specific points of the castle's construction. It's not all about like, the castle. It's about Holmes.
Yes.
And when he focuses on a certain thing, and like when he's constructing the kiln in the basement, for example. Like, I think of that moment and how it gets brought up occasionally, but the book's not all about his methods of how he killed people. It's more about the methods in which he did lure people, and a lot of it is from the victim's perspective, because Larson is pulling from letters and notes and accounts from other people, because we're never going to understand exactly how Holmes' mind works. Mm-hmm. He had memoirs, sure, but...
And he was an amazing liar.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he kept lying. Even when he was caught, he still kept lying.
Mm-hmm.
Like... He was so good at it. I mean, there's that one point, which is so baffling to me, when he's realized there's 15 creditors, and it's like, oh crap, all these like different names and monikers I've used to basically con my way into getting loans and all that have come to fruition. And he basically remains calm and is like, I'm so sorry. And the 15 creditors are like, yeah, we believe you. I'm like, what?
He acts like, he genuinely didn't mean to do wrong, and play the part and people will believe it.
There was that whole thing where cops would stop by and he would just suddenly become the best of friends with them, and it's like, wow, it's not a shocker. Cops were totally looking the other way. Anyway, it just goes to show, like, the book basically explains this man was a liar, but a damn good one. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to know, and that's probably why Larson probably didn't take as much from his accounts as he did from the victims and their families' accounts and their letters.
And I think that's so much more important, because it serves to give voice to these people, it's not glorifying Holmes. It's painting the picture that this man was depraved and cunning, but cold, calculating, sure, but not someone to be glorified.
I think this is also the first time in a true crime, unfortunately, in a true crime story, where I actually can remember the names of the victims.
Yes.
Because they were given a personality. And not just a personality, because one of the things I struggle with after a certain point of listening to because I've listened to true crime podcasts, or back when I was young, my mom was obsessed with those, like, How to Catch a Murderer, Killer Kids, and all those stuff that was on TLC. Or, I can't remember what it was. TLC?
I think it was TLC.
Yeah, I can't remember anymore. Or Lifetime, or whatever. And if they do focus on the victim, it's always like this white girl who everybody loved her, and she was endearing and charming, and oh, what a sad soul to have a life lost. And I'm just like, oh geez, I can't take... Why is it always this type of victim? This, oh, she was the most charming person in the world. She just brought a smile to everyone's face. And I can't remember any of their names. Or even if the focus is on... There's the True Crime podcast where it's focused on the murder, and it's just the murder, and I don't remember the victims' names. The victims here, they're given personality. I know, like, Minnie Williams I can visualize her very perfectly. Same with her sister Anna. Mm-hmm. And, like, they are given enough personality that I can actually remember them.
Mm-hmm.
okay, these are real people, and I gotta keep reminding myself that these are real people. I think it's the fact Larson actually described their personality and described their appearance, and
they're not just as much as is fair. They're not just a name and a method of death.
yes,
They're a little more realized through this work where Larson's doing a job of being like, well, here's who they were as people. The amount of research in this is pretty staggering, honestly. I like this one a lot. I think there's only one nonfiction book that I've enjoyed about this much, and that one was about the life of Sir Henry Morgan. So
we do have a couple questions, just a couple. We have one from Bringer. Thank you, Bringer. And he asked, what's our favorite World's Fair invention? And that's a toughie.
shredded wheat.
No, it's not. I mean, if it is for you, but...
It's not. Does this count?
I'm not sure if I'm really fond of that. It came out of laziness. That's the thing. Because they're like, oh crap, we need someone to play music for these belly dancers. And this guy's like, I don't know what to do. Here, let me play some notes.
And then he regrets not getting the rights for that later.
Soul Bloom was a nice little side character, I gotta admit, in this whole thing. What a good name, right? Soul Bloom.
It's also, like, there was, like, so many details that I'm also feeling like I'm blanking on, like, the other things that, like, I feel there were, like, multiple moments where, like, something was mentioned, and I was like, hey, I should remember to mention that, and I'm like, what was it? I cannot remember.
The automatic, wasn't there, like, the earliest form of the automatic dishwasher or the automatic, washing machine?
Yes, the dishwasher.
Yep.
Oh, you know what? There's also Aunt Jemima's pancake mix.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little cringe now, but yeah.
Yeah, actually.
Considering Aunt Jemima was not a real person.
Nope. Have you noticed there was a weird focus on the belly dancers? They kept coming up quite a bit. And, like, there's a point where, like, I think was it Olmsted? Who was like, I was going to do something where we were all going to dance with the belly dancers. I'm like, what?
Even Burnham. That was funny.
There was definitely someone who was like, hey, I had this really good idea in order to help boost interest in the fair. And we're going to have everybody do this big dance. And it's going to be all the fair's architects are going to dance with belly dancers. And...
Oh, my God.
Like, wow, guys.
We gotta do something interesting, because otherwise the people who care about finances are gonna be like, hey, we need to bring these cold-eyed people into the fair that are gonna just be like, no fun, only money saving,
like
no spectacle.
You can see the reasoning from it from a mile away.
Yeah, I think that's why it kept getting brought up, because it's like, I remember Larson, the narrative bringing up that bit where Burnham is writing letters to his wife Margaret all the time, and there's that one where he's like, he's so eager to see her. He's like, when I get back, I need you to be completely available to do as I wish. And it talks about how for the Victorian times that letter was practically steamed oven. And I'm like,
oh my God.
No wonder belly dancing was so shocking at the time, because if that's what it takes, it's like, wow, okay.
I guess it would be the Ferris wheel, because I mean,
I'm with you, actually, because we did extol its virtues earlier, but yeah, I think one of the greatest inventions of that fair was the Ferris wheel.
Mm-hmm. I feel like there was other stuff, but yeah, I'm just gonna have to go with the Ferris wheel, just because, like, that is definitely something that I always enjoy.
Same.
Well, I will also admit, I think, going back to that thing with Helen Keller, the thing that was shown off was the Braille printing press.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great invention. What a very useful, beautiful invention.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure, they had the Braille typewriter, but then that same inventor coming with the printing press is very important.
And then we received a comment from Dan, or Urkelbot666. Thank you, Dan. I liked the story as a whole and was pleased at how much I learned. I thought the characters were a little tough to pick up on, since we only really get to know most of them in terms of their jobs and how much Burnham got along with them. Olmsted was sort of fun to hear about. Cranky old bastard.
Again, we all love Olmsted. He's the comic relief character.
And then the Prendergast stuff was interesting.
We didn't talk about Prendergast.
No, we missed him, yeah.
That's like the third, that's like the weird third wheel of this whole thing. It's like Fair, Holmes, Fair, Holmes. And here's a little thing about Prendergast.
It was him and like the mayor and his
Yes.
love for
Yeah.
watermelon. That's one detail that stuck out to me was he had to have watermelon with every meal.
And he loved to wear his black slouch hat.
Right.
Mayor Harrison.
And Prendergast thinking like, but I run this. This is all me.
Because I wrote so many letters, I've clearly earned this. He must know who I am.
And then ends up being a killer by killing them. And actually how the mayor dies.
Yeah, that sucked for the mayor. But like it was interesting to have Pendergast in there as like obviously he becomes a killer, but just like what kind of leads him, his like delusions and like the way he ends up in comparison to like Holmes, who is like, I don't know, it was interesting having those two different types of killers.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between the two.
They were both obviously set up as like, because we got those hints early on, like, oh, he's gonna do something bad at the end.
Yeah.
So he's like almost like another villain in the story, but like
It's showing kind of this slow build up to an inevitability. And it sets the tension actually decently if you don't know the history. Like the fact that he keeps writing these kind of weird, vaguely unhinged postcards to random people. And then they keep those cards, and it's important to remember that the reason those cards were kept and are important now is because of inevitably what Prendergast would do. And you were going to make a comment about the mayor.
Well, one of the things that I thought was interesting too is like as the mayor's dying, I forget who it was. He's like, "Oh, you got shot above the heart. You're fine." No, I'm dying, damn it. And he dies. He's like, in the comments, like, he died angry at me because I didn't believe him. I don't.
Carter Harrison's ghost just hovering over you.
I feel so bad because this is a murder, but it's written in such a funny way.
You know, despite everything, though, I know who my least favorite character is. Grover Cleveland. Fuck that guy.
And then he said, I wasn't as engaged with the Holmes story as I thought I'd be, but it was interesting enough. I've heard that from a couple people who have read this. Like, they said, oh, I got more interested in the World's Fair than I did the Holmes story.
Well, it's definitely felt like there was, just like we said, a good chunk of the book at one point focuses only on the World's Fair. It definitely felt like there was a lot more going on there. And, like, yeah, there were parts where, like, they're talking about, like, the women's building. And I was invested in that. I was like, did it end up with all these terrible decorations on it? Like, I needed to know.
Yeah, that's right. The sort of patchwork quilt thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
man.
like, and then when they were talking about the Ferris wheel, like, starting up again, and everyone's, like, crowding on it, and then, like, the lead up to, like, oh, is it gonna resist wind? Like, there were a lot of things about the World's Fair that I was, like, way more invested in than I thought I would be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe because we in our, like, present day, just, like, hear about serial killers all the time, and there is so much serial killer content. So, like, okay, yeah, Holmes and his murder castle. Obviously, we know what's going on there. But tell me more about this World's Fair, because this is cool.
Well, and to be fair, the three of us are keenly interested in, like, theme parks in general. And what is
That's
the World's
true.
Fair if not a huge spectacle theme park?
Right, exactly.
I mean, look at, if you want to talk about World's Fairs in the 1964, or was it 63? It was 64, I think. 1964 World's Fair, where Disney was actually involved and had things like, It's a Small World premiere and, the Magic Skyway that gave us the dinosaurs in the one...
Carousel Progress.
Carousel of Progress. Like, you think about it, these World's Fairs were these houses of spectacle and wonder, and getting to see... how that kind of, that same build-up as people who are keenly interested in that sort of thing on the other end. It doesn't surprise me that much that we are, as people who are interested in that we're also interested in the fair, almost a little more so than Holmes.
Actually, the question that Dan asked, or he asked two questions. What attractions would each of you want to experience most at the World's Fair? God, I would love to go through all the different buildings. Like the liberal arts one, the women's building,
Literally everything.
I want to experience everything at the World's Fair. Are you serious?
Yeah.
For me, it's food. Let me try all the food.
Yeah.
It's always food for me.
I want to ride one of those little electric boats around in the lagoons and stuff, and go to the wooded island. That sounded like fun. I'm firmly in Olmsted's camp about like actually working the landscape so it looks good. That's what I think another reason I liked him as a character, and the idea of having like, well, you have to have electric boats, Burnham. Don't you dare bring steam launches in here. And then he finally caves and brings steam launches in, and also it's like, God damn it.
And also probably sneak away for the Buffalo Bill Wild Show.
Yeah, honestly.
That for sure.
I think it's interesting because it is complicated, but like at least Buffalo Bill was actually employing like bringing in people who were Native American for the show.
Yeah.
It's tricky because like at the time they're like, oh, and we're gonna stage warband attacks on like a settler's cabin, and here I come as the white hero with all my soldiers to fight you off, even if it's play acting. I'd still see the show, but I'm gonna be tugging my collar the whole goddamn time.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, here's one thing. How cool would it be to see Annie Oakley?
That's the reason why I would go. I want to see Annie Oakley as the sharpshooter and see how impressive she was with a gun. So.
I want to be there for that moment when Buffalo Bill Cody met Susan B. Anthony. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, that'd be cool too. His second question is, do you think there's anything that could have shut down the fair? Follow-up question, do you think there's anything that would have made Buffalo Bill shut down his show?
I'm going to say no on Buffalo Bill.
Well, unless they came by and were like, get off our property.
Well, he was on his own property.
Oh, that's right.
They wouldn't let him go to the fair, so he literally bought property across the street. He's like, this is my concession. Can't tell me to do shit.
He was like the side attraction for the World's Fair.
Yes. He's one of those little venues outside of San Diego Comic-Con that...
Oh my god. I mean, like, hard to say, because, like, there was, like, say, like, the fire that happened. Which building was it?
The cold storage building, ironically. Jeez. Someone didn't build a chimney correctly, and it turned into a backdraft scenario.
Right. And then, like, how, I think they mentioned, like, how sales, like, ticket sales had, like, gone up immensely the following day, and I was like, you would think that they would at least close for the day to, like, make sure everyone was safe or whatnot.
You'd think that.
Things were not crazier, but just like, you know, less safety precautions than now.
When what was it, like a storm or that windstorm hit and everybody's like freaking out and they're like, oh god, are we gonna get through? Are we gonna live?
What I admired about that part was you got to see how well built the Ferris wheel was, and even that hot air balloon getting torn to shreds didn't factor into it that much.
Okay, that's the attraction I would want to go on, is the hot air balloon.
Ooh.
How cool would that be?
Yeah. That Midway did sound pretty rad, if not a little bit racist, just being honest.
There's a lot of moments, again, a lot of collar tugging moments that I was like, oh,
like that,
no.
Like that bit where Olmsted is talking about what to bring into the fair and he wants to liven it up, and he's like, hey, maybe we could have some I won't use his exact words, we could have some people of different ethnicities in their specific costumes, and he uses a certain term to refer to them going out there and just being like moments of improvisation, and Burnham's like, no. Probably not for the reasons we would hope, but he's just like, no, Olmsted. What? No.
Yeah. That's all the questions we have. Do we have any last minute thoughts?
I've actually never been to Chicago, but I wonder how much of the grounds are still left, if anything. If you still get, like, I know the Murder Castle's long gone.
Yeah.
There's a post office there where it used to be. But I wonder how interesting it would be to try and retrace some of the areas. Like, if you went to the area that was Jackson Park.
So, you know that statue?
Big Mary?
She's there. She's still there.
Oh, wow. I'd love to see it.
Yeah. I've been to a Chicago airport because one of my flights actually stopped in Chicago and I had to wait in the airport, but I never left the airport, so I don't really consider that being in Chicago. So I would love to visit Chicago at some point.
There is a museum they have there that, like, specializes in like medieval armor that I have been really wanting to go see.
Ooh.
So one day.
Grab Creative Horror. We're all taking a trip to Chicago.
Sweet home, Chicago.
This also does feel like a kind of a love letter to Chicago as well.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely doesn't. It definitely doesn't like flatter the city in any capacity. It talks about how, gross and grimy and smoke filled and polluted and just gross and nasty that area was. A big city is in the late 1800s. Mm-hmm. But those are just facts. It's not like anyone's trying to take a big dump on the city's reputation, especially not Erik Larson. He's just saying this is just the way it was. Mm-hmm. Hey, there's a dead horse in the street. Who cares? So it does feel like a love letter to Chicago, and like again, it's all these people getting together out of a sense of civic pride, trying to promote their city, and there's something to be said about that.
It was interesting to read or listen to this while also being kind of aware of like there is an actual serial killer out there right now in Stockton, California. So it was kind of interesting being in this like look back into history and then kind of also comparing it to present day. I mean, if you haven't heard about it and want to know more about it, there I think recently I read an article. There was an article like 4 days ago from NPR that kind of summarized it a little bit, but it's some dude is targeting Hispanic men and shooting them.
Oh shit.
Nowhere near as like on the level of Holmes in that this man is a fucking coward and is just approaching people on the street at night and shooting at them. But it is, up to like 7 victims now. So yes, this is a serial killer. So, inform yourselves, be cautious. But yeah, I don't know. It's just this weird of like, this is a reality. And felt like I was hearing fiction, but no, this was reality. And we are still in that reality. I don't.
Damn.
I mean, I think people forget that happened back in the 90s. That's not long ago.
Again, that's why it feels so weird that they're doing this series about it now.
But I think that...
which does feel like sensationalizing it, so...
Yeah. Well, I mean, like... the 90s is, like, apparently far enough back now that, you can have Halloween costumes of it. It's apparently that disconnected from it already.
Oh, Lord. Well, on that sobering note... Hey, what are we reading next month?
Yeah, let's go back to the world of fiction, please? I need my escape.
I'm down for that. Look, we were reading about stuff 130 years ago. That's fine. That's far removed enough that I'm okay with it.
Yeah, mm-hmm. But I think sometimes when you realize like this is real, this is a real thing that happened. These are real people.
There were real victims. Yeah.
I think that's the scary part of it is when you realize, no, this is something that actually happened. That's the scary part. But yeah, we're going to go back to the world of fiction. We're going to go back into horror now. And we're going to read something shorter because it is Halloween month. This is our busiest month. And we want to read something that would just not take as much time, but still pack a punch. We found a novella that actually takes place at sea, which we've never done before.
I don't think so.
We will be reading Sakalina by Philip Fracassi. Sage showed us a TikTok where it was stated that these could be actually read in an evening. So, and also I checked online; it's only $2 for the Kindle, $5 for the paperback. So,
good way to support a smaller author.
Yes. Also check your local libraries or Libby, because I was on my Libby for my local library.
If you like what you hear, check out our other podcasts on the Creative Horror Network at creativehorror.com, or check out our YouTube page. You just look up Creative Horror, and we are the purple eye icon. So keep an eye out, because we have a Midnight Marinara coming out on October 30th.
That's right. If all goes well, as of this recording, the script is being worked on. We're going to give it a couple passes. We're already doing some casting for it. I think it's going to be a good one. It might be a little tricky to put together because of the situation where we've moved. I'll just be completely honest, but I will get it done. It will get done, and I want to make sure that Midnight Marinera is brought back from the dead on time to celebrate our 9-year anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. We'll see what happens at the 10-year, but for now, I've been dropping a couple hints about this, but I've said this already. We collectively, Creative Horror, came up with a story for this one together.
A creative horror original.
Yes, and I'm very excited to be the one to kind of take that and put it into a script format. But we were all involved in the story creation process.
Until then, happy Halloween, and it seems like even though it seems like it's getting dark out, and even if we blow out our candles, I can see the lights of the World Fair shining our way, and it looks beautiful.
Fantastic. We really got to do something about all these flower beds. They ruin the vista. They're cheap and tacky and childish. It's got to be all greenery, damn it!
Good evening, intrepid listeners. This is the Pasta Shade, the host of Midnight Marinera, and this podcast is part of CreativeHorror.com, a network of podcasts and creators working together to build a constructive community of horror fans. For more content like this, visit us at CreativeHorror.com.